Before I show you homes, I may ask you to sign something first, and a lot of buyers are surprised by that. You might be wondering, do I really have to sign an agreement just to see homes? Is this something new? And does this mean I'm responsible now for paying the commission? And these are some of the biggest questions buyers are asking right now because the rules around buyer agency have changed. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how buyer agency works in New Jersey, why these agreements exist, how commissions are handled now, and what you should expect from your real estate agent. So let's get into it. If you're planning to buy a home in New Jersey right now, you may be hearing a lot of new terms like buyer agency agreements, buyer representation, and commissions being negotiated and handled differently than they were in the past. And understandably, many buyers are confused. If you're thinking about buying a property, understanding this process will help you make much better decisions, especially when it comes to real estate at the shore. For those who don't know me, I'm Jessica Lees with Lees Real Estate Agency, a family-owned and operated brokerage here in the Wildwoods, and we help buyers navigate this process every single day. So let's break it down. Why did the rules change? Well, you may have heard about the major real estate industry settlement that happened in 2024 involving the National Association of Realtors. The outcome of that settlement changed how commissions and buyer representation are handled across the country. One of the biggest changes is that buyer representation must now be clearly documented in writing before an agent shows properties. In other words, before you go out touring homes with an agent, there needs to be an agreement in writing together with the agent and you explaining who the agent represents, what services they will provide, how they will be compensated. The goal of these changes was to create more transparency for consumers. Buyers should know exactly who represents them, what services they will receive, and how commissions will work. So what is buyer agency? First, let's start with the basics. Buyer agency simply means that a real estate agent represents the buyer in a transaction. That agent works on the buyer's behalf, not the seller's. Their job is to help you find properties, analyze pricing, negotiate the offer, guide you through inspections, manage the transaction, and protect your interests. Now, this might sound obvious, but historically in real estate, many buyers didn't realize who the agent actually represented. In many cases, the agent showing homes technically represented the seller because the buyer was working through the listing brokerage, or they were perhaps acting as a dual agent but not really disclosing it properly. That's one of the reasons buyer agency laws evolved, to make sure buyers understood who was representing them. In some cases, your buyer agency agreement may state that your agent can work as a disclosed dual agent. So what is dual agency? It means that the same brokerage is representing both the seller and the buyer in the same transaction. This can happen when a buyer is interested in a property listed by the same agency with whom the buyer's agent is affiliated. In New Jersey, this is legal, but it must be fully disclosed and agreed to in writing by both parties. Dual agency exists because in smaller or local markets like the Wildwoods, it's not uncommon for buyers to be interested in properties listed by the same brokerage they're already working with. So rather than forcing buyers to switch agencies, the law allows dual agency as long as it's transparent. The key is disclosure and informed consent. When dual agency occurs, the brokerage must remain neutral between the buyer and the seller. That means that the agent cannot advocate for one side over the other. For example, an agent cannot tell the buyer how much more to offer. They cannot tell the seller how much less to accept. They cannot advise either party on negotiation strategy against the other. And they cannot share private information about one party to the other. But even in a dual agency situation, the agent will manage the transaction. They will ensure all paperwork is handled properly, they'll coordinate inspections, timelines, and communication, and they will provide factual information about the property and the process and full disclosure. So what as a buyer are you giving up with dual agency? The biggest difference is that you're not getting full advocacy. You won't have someone advising you on how to win the negotiation, and you won't have someone solely focused on your best financial outcome. Dual agency may make sense in some situations though. Some buyers are very comfortable with dual agency, especially if they already know the property they want, and they know their agent. Some buyers don't feel they need negotiation guidance, and some buyers prefer a more streamlined process. But it may not make sense if you're unsure about pricing, if you want strong negotiation guidance, or if you are a first-time buyer. You may feel more comfortable having your own dedicated representation. Now let's cover designated agency because this is something that a lot of buyers don't fully understand and it's really important. Designated agency is when two different agents within the same real estate brokerage represent different parties in the same transaction. And this is now also legal in New Jersey after the 2024 law changes. So for example, one agent represents the seller and the other agent in that same office represents the buyer. Now here's why that matters. Unlike dual agency, where one agent or brokerage has to stay neutral, with designated agency, each party still gets full representation. That means your agent can advise you on pricing, help you structure your offer, negotiate on your behalf, and advocate for your best interests. So from a buyer's perspective, you're still getting that full level of service and guidance. Now, even though both agents work for the same brokerage, there are internal policies in place to keep things confidential between the two sides. And just like dual agency, this arrangement has to be disclosed and agreed to in writing upfront by both seller and buyer. As a buyer, you always have options, whether that's working with your own agent, agreeing to dual agency, or choosing designated agency when it's available. Let's get into the buyer agency agreement itself. This is a written agreement between a buyer and a real estate brokerage, and it outlines the terms of representation. Typically, the agreement includes how long the representation lasts, what geographic area it covers, the duties of the agent, and how the agent will be compensated. Now, sometimes buyers get nervous when they hear the word contract, but in reality, this agreement is simply clarifying the professional relationship. It's very similar to hiring other professionals, like an attorney, a financial advisor, or a contractor. You're simply establishing expectations on both sides. And importantly, many agreements can be written with reasonable timeframes or cancellation provisions, so buyers don't feel locked in forever, like with a bad cell phone contract. Now let's talk about the value side of this for you, the buyer, because sometimes people think buyer agents just open doors. But a good buyer agent is doing much more than that behind the scenes. For example, your agent should help you understand the market. They should explain recent comparable sales and help you understand whether a property is priced appropriately. They should help develop a strategy for negotiations. In competitive markets, writing the right offer strategy can make the difference between winning and losing. And in addition, they coordinate the transaction. A real estate transaction can and usually does involve lenders, inspectors, title companies, appraisers, and attorneys, and the other agent working for the other side. And your agent should be coordinating all of these moving parts. They also continue to negotiate for you because negotiations don't stop once the offer is accepted. They continue during inspections, appraisal issues, and repair requests. And sometimes unexpected, unpleasant issues can arise, during which your agent will also advocate for you. So how do commissions work now? And this is probably the question buyers ask the most. Who pays the commission? Historically, the seller paid the commission for both the listing agent and the buyer agent. That commission was offered through the MLS, but now the system has changed somewhat. Commissions are no longer displayed through the MLS in the same way that they once were. That means your buyer agency agreement will specify how your agent is compensated. However, in many transactions today, sellers are still offering compensation to cover the fee due to buyer agents because it helps attract more buyers. Your agent should clearly explain how the commission works, whether the seller is offering compensation and your options for asking the seller to include coverage of your buyer agent's fee in your offer, and whether there could be any difference that you as the buyer would need to cover. Transparency is the key word here. By now you may be asking, what happens if you don't sign an agreement? Some buyers ask if they can simply avoid signing a buyer agency agreement altogether. And technically, you could choose not to have representation, but that means the agent you are dealing with would likely represent the seller instead of you, and that changes the relationship significantly. If an agent represents the seller, their job is to protect the seller's interest, not yours as the buyer. That means they cannot advise you on pricing strategy, negotiate fully on your behalf, or advocate for you in the same way. And they can and must share information about you with the seller that would give the seller an advantage over you in negotiations. For example, while touring a home, if you said something like, "Wow, I really love this home so much more than any of the other ones I've seen," the agent can tell the seller that, and that will probably give the seller some thoughts about how to negotiate with you. So while it's possible to proceed without representation, most buyers find that having a dedicated agent representing them provides significant advantages. And if you're signing a buyer agency agreement, you should absolutely expect a high level of service. Your agent should be responsive, returning calls and messages quickly, knowledgeable, understanding the local market and pricing trends, strategic, helping you craft competitive offers, and organized, managing the timeline and paperwork. And most importantly, your agent should be acting in your best interests. That's what agency representation means. So let's talk about how all this applies to the Wildwoods market. In the Wildwoods specifically, buyer representation can be especially important. This market includes nuances like different types of properties, condos, single-family homes, duplexes, vacation rentals, investment properties, and vacant land. And each of those property types has different rules, different costs, and different risks. For example, with condos, buyers need to understand association fees, reserve funds, bylaws, and rental rules. And with houses, buyers need to consider flood insurance costs, zoning concerns, and individual rental regulations. A knowledgeable local agent helps you navigate those details. So with all of this said, what is my advice for buyers? If you're buying real estate in New Jersey today, it's simple. Don't view the buyer agency agreement as a hurdle. View it as a professional relationship that protects you. Make sure you understand how long the agreement lasts, what geographical areas the agreement covers, what services the agent will provide, and how the compensation structure will work. Ask questions. A good agent will happily walk you through all of the details. The goal should be that everyone understands the process before moving forward. Again, transparency is key. If you're confused, ask questions. And if you're still confused, you might not be working with the right agent. So if you're thinking about buying in the Wildwoods and you have questions about buyer agency or the home buying process in general, feel free to reach out anytime. Again, I'm Jessica Lees with Lees Real Estate Agency, and our team helps buyers navigate the Wildwoods real estate market every single day. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe because we'll be posting more videos about buying and owning property at the Jersey Shore.